Okay, why do we use brake ducts? It's really simple. It's to keep brakes cool. Brakes on your car, especially on track, what they are heat generators. And you know what I talked about before is the Mustangs, 3,800 pounds, hurtling down the straightaway at 120, 130 miles an hour. That is a bunch of kinetic energy in motion. So to stop that kinetic energy, you know, object in motion says to stay in motion until acted upon an outside source. Well, stopping could be done by a guardrail, a concrete barrier, a tree, but those really aren't the preferred methods of slowing a car down. Brakes are. So the brakes take that kinetic energy and turn to heat energy. So that's why if you're on track, you have to cool the brake ducts because they get really, really hot. I can tell you on my car, I'm seeing typically 100 or 1,200 degrees rotor temperature, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we have brake pads that match the temperature range of what the rotors are running at, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Because we have some of our customers with GT500s that are really, really fast and running 1,600 degrees rotor temperature, which is really a lot. That's like a race car. But they've got pads that will go up to 2,000 degrees, so that kind of takes care of that. So let's go to brake ducts. My brake ducts are pretty unique, and this design has been around for a very long time. But as you can see, the inlet is a 3-inch and oval, and that is done specifically. We'll prop up here. Okay, the reason that's done that, if we could lose the title down there. Okay, now I got to move this way. Move this way. There.
Move the other way because. Yeah.
Okay, here's the inside of the rotor, and the reason I go to the squished oval design is if you match that up to the rotor, you can see that 100% of the air goes into the eye of the rotor. That way?
Yep.
Here we go. The 100% of the air, because it's squished, goes in the eye of the rotor. Now, I don't have an example, but there's a lot of like 4-inch ducts out there, and you think, well, 4-inch is bigger, it's going to be better. The problem is if this is three like that, and it's squished, a 4-inch is going to come out, and it's actually going to go across the face of the rotor. So what happens is that as the air comes in, it's going to hit the face of the rotor, it's going to disrupt the airflow, it's going to cause some turbulence as it rolls over and into the center, number one. Secondly, you're going to get uneven brake pad wear because you're running different temperatures inside and outside. And we pretty much proved that. We're doing the Mustang Challenge in 2010, I think. We did some testing with my car and the FR500S cars back to back. They had 4-inch brake ducts. I had my 3-inch right here, and the rotor, temperatures were similar, except for the GT500 with a 4-inch had a different outside and inside temperature, which explained why we used brake pads at a different rate. So that's why we use the oval. And this is for S197. And speaking of brake temperatures, what we talked about before, brake rotor temperature paint. Thank you. Prop just happened to appear on my list. And this is what we use. It goes on like this orange color, but as it gets hot, it keeps changing colors, and it'll stop changing color at the maximum temperature. So that's how we know how to do our brake ducts, and it comes with this nifty little card that you can see the different colors that give you different temperatures. Like I say, mine typically around 1,200 degrees. Pretty cool little paint thing. Some of our customers up to 1,600 degrees. Now this is to me, this is like the coolest thing ever, having just one color. But back when I started out in racing, we had as many as 5 different colors, and you have like 5 different paint stripes on there. And see, whenever they kick off, then that's going to be your high temperature. This is so easy, just one color and it goes. So anyway, this is for the S197. This is actually the second design we came up with. This is the SN95. And actually, there's another piece to this. It's a 2-piece for the SN95s, and you can see it's oval. Oh, somebody asked on the question for a Fox body, if they're going to upgrade the brakes and brake ducts, what your spindle to use. If you got a Fox and you're converting, go to a 96 or newer SN95 spindle. The reason for that is the geometry, the steering geometry is better, and also brake ducts fit better. So if you're doing a conversion on a Fox, SN95, 96 and newer is the way to go. So that's SN95. An interesting thing, this is for the 550. The 550 with its bigger rotors, we didn't have to squish it. We can just use a straight 3-inch and it perfectly goes inside. So that's kind of like the brake ducts on the spindle side. Now, the other question, we had other question on where to get, if you don't have a car that's already has the like ovals or, to pull in air to use for a brake duct, what do you do? Well, we have a universal, we call it universal brake ducting kit. Brake duct, brake ducting. And the reason we call it universal is there's so many different front fascia designs. I mean, we would go crazy trying to come up with specific inlets for every one of them, where just to keep it more cost effective, we go to what we call universal. And what that is it's a little duct, and it's a formed plastic. And what we do is have you locate a spot that's, the closer you get to the center of the car, the higher the pressure, the more desirable it is. Off to the edge, the air is moving quicker around the side of the car, which means the pressure goes up, goes down, and isn't as effective. That's, we learn all this aerodynamic stuff in the academy. So anyway, we give this, and what you do is just trim it to fit wherever it is. And to make it even simpler, you trim it to fit, drill some holes, and we use zip ties to hold it in place. I mean, it couldn't be simpler than that. And of course, a 3-inch duct goes on the back, and away you go. We ran into a situation with the GT500s with the track back. They've got so much radiator coolers in front, it's pretty much impossible to get air anywhere from the center of the car. What we've done, because a lot of people don't want to take their fog lights out, what we've done, we've got a GT500 in the shop that we're updating, and is going to get the new rear suspension, which is information coming in weeks. And what we found, we're going through the car doing a nut and bolt check and going through everything. I mean, I could just tell straight away the front rotors were really, really hot just by the color. And I looked at the brake pads, and they were like super hot too. So we started looking a little deeper, and what happened, there was these little like 3-inch holes in the lower radiator cover, and the brake ducts had actually come off. So it was getting very, very little air to the brake ducts. So we came up with a really cool design. It's the first time we've done this, and it's pretty cool. Let me kind of show you what we did. Okay, here we are, Cars and Coffee Live. This is a NACA duct. For those, I mean, a lot of people have seen NACA ducts, and this is kind of the best picture I could find to give the best description. But essentially what it is, it's a flat duct. It's narrow in the front, and it widens out at the back and goes deeper. It actually draws air down, as opposed to a scoop on the top. This actually is more efficient. It draws air down. It doesn't increase drag at all. And NACA duct was developed back, I'm going to say, 70 years ago. And NACA stands for National and Aeronautics Committee or something like that.
Obviously, you didn't study it before.
Well, I wrote it down, but it's on my desk. Anyway, that was the precursor to NASA. So this is where the NACA ducts come from, and they're used heavily in airplanes and used heavily in race cars for getting air in without disrupting airflow and without creating drag. So what we did, we took this concept, and this is the very outside edge. And you can see this radiator right there. And it's really hard to get a duct in there. So we used this NACA duct off to the side, and Kirk got really clever, and he made it look just like the diamond shape of the lower radiator. But this way we're pulling air in, and because of that, we got an absolutely straight line back to the brake ducts. And you know, that's going to give, you know, a lot better airflow. The brakes are going to run cooler, and the pads will last longer, the rotors will last longer. Now, we use this type of we use I got a piece back here. We use silicone hose, and the reason I do it, this is like temperature 600 degrees, so I mean it's really good. But the other thing, this is about as good as it gets. This is actually aircraft hose. This is what they use in airplanes, you know. And if it's good enough for airplanes, it's good enough for our cars. I know there's a lot of other brake ducting materials out there, but this is the one we used to offer, the neoprene. But you know, it just only costs a little bit more, and it's just so much better.
600-degree temperature.
Yeah, it's got 600-degree temperature in the silicone, and that's what's in all of our kits. You know, they get in the brake ducting, you get, you know, the ducts, some zip ties to hold this in place, some longer zip ties to zip it around the frame rail, and then of course the 3-inch hose clamps to put it all on. So that's kind of our little thing on brake ducts. I'll see if I had any other questions on brake ducts. Fox body. Oh yeah, there's another question about, you know, and if you don't have a car that already has ducts in the front, what do you do? Well, universal. I mean, that's as easy as it gets. Just remember, the closer you get to the center of the car, the higher the pressure. Typically, what I look for is like you've got your, you know, your lower radiator opening. Typically I'm right at the outside edge of that, which is just not that far off the center, which means you're still at a high pressure point. And high pressure is what you want. You want to get that air into the center of the eye of the rotor, so that because the rotor's cool from the center out. That's what the vanes are for. And I also should mention 2-piece slotted rotors. I mean, that's all we ever use. Never ever use drilled rotors. The reason is they're going to crack at the drill holes. Absolutely 100% unconditionally guarantee they will crack at the holes. Also, if you got a lot of holes around there, you're missing surface area. But what the grooves do is they actually serve 2 functions. One, they clear brake dust out, and secondly, they release gases. Now, as a brake duct and as a brake on the rotor, as it's on there, it'll build up gas pressure at the trailing edge of the rotor. And as it does, I mean, you don't get as much braking. Back in the Celine program, we couldn't use slotted rotors. So the brake pads, actually, when they came off for a change, we never looked at the back, always had to look at the front, because the back of the pads were always, you know, almost new, and the fronts were gone. They came out as a pure wedge. That's because of all the gas buildup in the back. Another thing is you always want to have these pointing forward, like so it goes like that. And you can actually double check on that. If you see the vanes, you can see the vanes have a flow to them. So you always want to make sure these are going forward. A couple of times we had cars come in for us to do work on, and the rotors were on backwards, and they were one customer kept going through brakes and rotors, and the guys working on his car kept putting the rotors on backwards, so they weren't cooling. They were pulling hot air in, so they weren't cooling at all. So it's really important to keep them facing forward. So that's a little thing on brake ducts.